Hello and welcome to Enchantment of Eternity's top 10 one-off Star Trek guest actors. In this video I will count down my 10 favorite guest actors who appeared in one episode of Star Trek. So this is a Patreon requested video requested by patron Norman Buchwald. In this video, I will attempt to count down my favorite guest actors. So first, gotta set up the ground rules. So one-off means they could only appear in one episode. So that eliminates recurring characters like, Garrick or Wayun or Q. Also, even characters who only appeared in like 2 episodes, like the Traveler or Sloan or something like that. So it has to be just in one episode. But that's only the character, though. I am going to include actors who appeared in other episodes, but as different characters. Let me give the example. Jeffrey Combs, for example. Wayun, Brunt, and Shran are all not eligible because those characters appeared in multiple episodes. But if I wanted to, which I didn't, but if I wanted to, I could include Jeffrey Combs' performance as that dude in the episode Zenkate, which The Rock was in. By the way, The Rock is eligible. But anyway, so Jeffrey Combs would be eligible for that episode because that character only appeared in one episode, but Jeffrey Combs would not be eligible for appearances for like Wayun because he was in multiple. If that makes any sense. So the character had to have appeared in just one episode, even if the actor appeared in different episodes. Even if the actor appeared in different episodes of different characters, still as long as the character only appeared once. And this, I'm counting down my favorite actor, though, for this video, not my favorite character. I'm actually gonna get another Patreon request coming up where I will be doing characters, but for this video it's actors. So this continues off of I did a top 10 favorite actors of Star Trek video like 4 or 5 years ago, and I recently did a revisited just for my Patreon supporters, which is I mentioned maybe doing this video, which is why Norman requested it. But that revisited for the actors thing will be released to the public about a month later after I'm releasing this. But anyway, so this is going by my sense of acting, so it's just my opinion. I know a lot of people would disagree with me. There's particularly, I was watching the episode Enterprise, or the podcast Enterprise Incidents with Scott Mance, where a lot of their favorite guest actors I think were among the worst, and I know some of my favorite TOS guest actors they would think is among the worst. So it's just my sort of sensibility of what I believe good acting is. So I came up with a short list of 25 actors, and I didn't want to cut them all out of this video. I want to at least mention them because I think it's worth mentioning. So I'm going to start at my number 25 and go all the way up to my number 14, but I am just going to list the actor, the character, and the episode they were in, nothing else. I am not going to talk about them because I don't want this video to be an hour and a half long. So but I did want to mention them, and so you can debate in the comments if you think I'm crazy for putting them there, because I'm not going to give my explanation as to why I'm putting them there. I'm just going to quickly list their names. Then I'm going to get to my 3 real honorable mentions, which I will give a bit of detail why I put them in there, and then my top 10, which I'll get into even more detail of why these actors are in my top 10. So, let me start with the honorable mentions. First is Jonathan Del Arco, Hugh and I Borg. Then there's Steve Annette, Garth of Izar, from Whom Gods Destroy, Jeffrey Hunter as Christopher Pike in The Cage, Steve Burkhoff as Haggith in Business as Usual, Steve McHattie as Senator Vreenak in the Pale Moonlight, Kimberly Cullum as Gaia in Thine Own Self, Frank Military as BC in Past Tense, Yvonne Craig as Marta in Whom Gods Destroy, Mark Leonard as Romulan Commander in Balance of Terror, Michael McKean as the Clown in The Thaw, Joan Collins as Edith Keeler in City on the Edge of Forever, and Henry Woronix, sorry, I couldn't pronounce that correctly, as Quarren in the episode Living Witness. So, now I'm not going to talk about that at all. Now I'm going to get into my 3 top honorable mentions that nearly made my top 10. So first honorable mention is Susanna Thompson as Lenara Khan from the episode Rejoined. Now, I think I know she appeared as the Borg Queen in Dark Frontier, and the less said about what I think about that episode, the better. I think she might have appeared in some... Oh yeah, she was in Frame of Mind as the crazy person who was talking to her spoon as well. But this was my favorite performance of hers in Star Trek. So this was the episode where it was, the first lesbian kiss in Star Trek, and it was the romance between her and Jadzia Dax because of Trill, and there used to be hosts that were married or whatever, and it's forbidden in their society, which I think was a great analogy for how sort of, well, not a really good analogy because it's kind of not one-to-one, but it was an analogy as something being taboo, like homosexuality, and the fact that it was featured 2 women was helped that regard. And I thought this was one of my favorite episodes because of the acting, mainly and the chemistry between her and Jadzia. It's not just that, it was LGBT, centric episode issue, or that I think 2 women kissing is hot, which isn't at all the case. It's that I think the acting and the chemistry between them is some of the best between any 2 pairs, particularly the scene with the kiss where you could tell they're really trying to restrain themselves but can't help it, and I think that was done very well. Now, she only gets an honorable mention because I actually think Terry Farrell did the better job out of the 2 of them, but she's not eligible because she's a main cast member, but she still did a really good job. She was still a good foil for her in this episode, so I gotta mention that. Next honorable mention is Scott McDonald as Granagar from the episode Hippocratic Oath. Now, Scott McDonald is another actor who appeared several times in Star Trek. I almost wanted to include him for the episode Face of the Enemy, where he played the Romulan. I think Navek was his name. He did a pretty good job in that episode too, but I think he did a slightly better job here as Granagar. He also played, I can't remember the name, but the main villain of Enterprise Season 3, the reptilian guy, the reptilian Zindi guy, but that was a recurring character, so he was not eligible for that. But regardless, I actually think he did a better job here as Granagar, as the Jem'Hadar who didn't need Cretshaw White and was trying to convince Bashir to find a cure. I thought his performance was actually quite sharp and quite powerful in this episode. So next honorable mention is Susan Doyle for playing Danara Pell in Life Signs. This is another one of my favorite romantic episodes, as well as Rejoined. This is the Vidian doctor who fell in love with the Doctor, on Voyager, the holographic Doctor, and I think that, this was actually quite powerful. I think she did an amazing job as someone who was sort of shy and it was not really used, and it being in all of the fact that being a hologram where that made her beautiful, and then the scene at the end where she tried to kill herself because she didn't want to go back to being ugly. I think it was a very powerful performance, and again, her coupled with Robert Picardo, there was a good duo there. So now we'll get into my top 10 favorite one-off guest actors in Star Trek, and we'll start with my number 10, which is Margo Rose as Elaine in The Inner Light. Now, I think some people may disagree with me here. I know that I think I recall them saying that she hadn't really done that many acting jobs before this episode, and she was pretty much rookie, which to me makes it more impressive because I think she's a huge part of why The Inner Light is so powerful. That she sells the fact of being Picard's wife and having to put up with Picard being indigent and being like, who am I? Where am I? Who are you? Why are you holding me here? When as far as she's concerned, hey, this is just my husband. Why are you treating me like shit all of a sudden? But her patience with him at first, but then running out of patience, and then later as they get older, and the scenes with them deciding to want to have kids and her reaction to that, I just think she sells this. Like, I was so impressed with her performance that I was, even before I learned that this was one of her first acting gigs, I was like, well, that's even more impressive. I think she did a damn good job here. Next, we'll get into my number 9, which is Saul Rubinik as Kiva Sfajo in the episode The Most Toys. Now, this is a particular case where I am particularly impressed just by the actor, because I don't think that much of this episode. I mean, it was okay. I don't hate this episode, but it's certainly not one of my favorites like The Inner Light or Rejoined or some of these other episodes I'll get to later, which are some of my favorite episodes of the franchise. This episode's kind of average, in my opinion. It's, had a death fake out with Data, which I think was kind of silly, and it was about a collector trying to collect data, which I thought was kind of silly. Saul Rubinik is the reason why I like the episode as much as I did. I think he's by far the highlight of this episode and the strong point and what makes it interesting. Just how powerful his performance is as a slimy, sleazy collector with no moral compunction. He really sells that role. And it is kind of dark, the story of how he got this job, because apparently another actor was originally cast in this role, and that actor committed suicide while filming this episode, so they were really hard up to get a replacement. And I think someone knew Saul, and so they were able to get him last minute. I think he was a Star Trek fan too, and thank God they did. Like, because that was a pure luck that they got him. In fact, I've seen, because they had shot some scenes with the previous actor, and I've seen some scenes like back to back of the two different actors doing the same performance, and I don't wish to speak ill of the dead, especially someone with the mental illness who committed suicide. It is very tragic, and I feel very bad about it. But Saul did such a much better job. It was, and he actually really, really sold the role, the way that he would just sell each line. Like, so you're going to shoot me, Data? Murder me. Like, just the way he sold it. It was just like, every word was just like, he's just such a good actor. Anyway, I've seen him in other things. Like, I remember seeing him, I think I saw him in The Unforgiven, which came out after this episode came out, but I saw before I saw this episode. And I was like, hey, it's that dude from The Unforgiven. And he was also in a couple of my favorite episodes of The Outer Limits. One of my favorite episodes, science fiction episodes of all time, in The Outer Limits. He did a great job in that too. And he's been in a lot of other things too. But anyway, really good actor. So next we'll get into number 8 on my list, which is Joel Grey as Caleb from Resistance. The Voyager episode, Resistance. So this is one of my favorite episodes of Voyager, and I know not a lot of people like this episode. I think this is a very underrated episode in my opinion. It's a very sort of dark episode, and this is a dark character. As essentially he's playing this crazy old man that people just think are silly and don't pay any attention to, but it turns out it's like the story behind him is actually extremely tragic. That his wife died, was being held by this authoritarian government and was killed in detention, and his daughter went to save her, and he wasn't brave enough to do it, and he actually tried to persuade his daughter not to do it, but she went anyway, and she also died. And so he had to live with that tragedy. In fact, he went, as he got older, went a bit crazy, where he actually thought that Captain Janeway was his daughter and was treating her like his daughter. And at first it does come off as a bit silly, and she kind of humors him until she hears that tragic backstory. And then at the end, right before he dies, Janeway tells him, I am your daughter, and I forgive you. And goddamn, like that scene just brings tears to my eyes. Now, they could argue that was more of Kate Mulgrew's selling that, but it was also Joel Grey and his performance of Caleb, which totally sold. At first made you think it was just silly, but then sold the tragedy behind the silliness, which is a very complex thing to do that I think he pulled off very nicely. So then we'll get into my number 7, Paul Winfield as Dathan in the episode Darmok. Now, Darmok is a fan favorite episode, one which I don't like quite as much as a lot of other people do. Like a lot of people would put this in the top 10 in TNG. For me, this might make a top 25 TNG, maybe top 30, but not top 10. But I do have to give it to Paul Winfield, who also, of course, appeared in Star Trek II as, I can't remember, Captain Terrell, that's his name, Captain of the Reliant, who did a good job in that movie as well. And you can't really recognize him with all the makeup on, but goddamn did he do a good job in this episode, totally selling this alien language and the alien barrier. Like, he totally sold this sort of metaphorical language. And part of the issue I have with this episode is that I think that language is not really realistic and doesn't actually make sense or doesn't hold up. But the actor sells it, and that's why I enjoy the episode as much as I do. And then having him trying to make an alliance with Picard and being frustrated, but then finally breaking through right before his death, which was very tragic. Like he does a damn good job, and he's speaking in essentially gibberish, and is able to sell it and able to form this huge connection with Picard. It's really an accomplishment, I think. So next we'll get into my number 6, which is Elaine Wheeler as Ikoria in the episode The Quickening. Now this again is a choice not many people would agree with. I think The Quickening is another very underrated episode, one of my favorite episodes of Deep Space Nine, and I think Elaine Wheeler as Ikoria does a damn good job. So if you don't remember the episode, it's the one where Bashir was in the Gamma Quadrant trying to cure a genetically engineered disease that was genetically engineered by the Dominion that was deemed uncurable, and he thought he could cure it, but he comes in and gets a lot of people killed because of his arrogance. And he meets a young woman who's pregnant, Ikoria, who decides to help him. And when everyone abandons him after he screws up, Ikoria is the only one who stands by him. And Ikoria then is about to die from the disease, but Bashir is striving to keep her alive long enough to give birth. And when she does give birth, she dies in childbirth, but her baby is born without the disease, being the first one, meaning that they now have a vaccine that will cure the babies, any babies being born in the future, which is, again, a very powerful moment. And again, it brings me to tears almost every time. But she really sold this, and I think she does an amazing job as someone who is optimistic in the face of a lot of dark situation and dark odds. Even after people died around her, when everyone gives up on Bashir, she still believes in him and is still willing to give him that confidence that he needs to do what he does. And God, yeah, her performance is so good in this episode. I do think it's really, really underrated. So next we'll get into my number 5, which is Bruce Davison as Jareth in the episode Remember. Now, Remember is one of my favorite Voyager episodes, and it's not an episode everyone likes. From the 3rd season, which I admit is a bad season, and this is one of the, barring the finale, this is one of the only good episodes, or towards the end of the season it got kind of good, but this is the only good episode at the beginning of the season anyway. And Bruce Davison, who most people know is playing the asshole senator in the X-Men movie, who then got replaced by Mystique. He really, really does an amazing job in this episode. Like, it's mainly where he plays a bigot and an asshole father, but the way he's very manipulative to his daughter and gets her to turn on the man she loves is really insidious, and Bruce Davison really fucking sells this. I think he does an amazing job at being the most despicable person that you could think of, but also coming off as charming at the same time. I think it's a really good performance. So then we'll get into my number 4, which is James Sloan as Maybor Dutrell in the episode Dutrell from Voyager. So James Sloan has appeared in several Star Trek episodes. In fact, I also wanted to put him on this list for his role as the Romulan defector in the episode The Defector in TNG, because he also did an absolutely amazing job in that episode as well. In fact, at first I was kind of torn between which performance that I would go with, but ultimately I went with Dutrell, because I think that is a slightly more powerful performance, because he's playing a character an Oppenheimer-esque character who has created this weapon of mass destruction that murdered thousands of people, and living with the guilt of that, and at first trying to justify his only driving motivation was science, but then you find out he's actually riddled with guilt and desperately trying to bring these people back to life. And and some of his interactions with Neelix were some of the best performances I've seen. And so, this James Sloan also played several other characters. He played Dr. Moore or Pole, but that's a recurring character because he appeared twice. He was, Odo's stepfather or whatever. And also, he played a future version of Alexander, and adult version, I should say, in the episode Firstborn. And I think he might have been in something else as well. But I think he's always been a good actor. He's always been whenever he pops up. But I think his performance as Dutrell was really, really a shining moment in the show. So next we'll get into my number 3, which is Kurtwood Smith as Anorex in Year of Hell. Now, most people know Kurtwood Smith as the dad from that 70s show, and apparently now he's also on that 90s show. I never watched that show. I think I've heard of it. I've known Kurtwood Smith as the villain from RoboCop. In fact, when I saw him on that 70s show, I just couldn't buy him as a dad. I'm like, he's a freaking crazy villain who's going around killing people from RoboCop. He's not a dad. Now, he also appeared in another Star Trek episode, in the Deep Space Nine episode, Things Past, which I also think he did a really good job in that episode as well, but that was a more minor role. And of course, he also played the president in Star Trek VI: The Undiscovered Country. But I think, yeah, Year of Hell, of course, is one of my favorite episodes of Star Trek, and I think Anorex was a very complex, interesting villain that really sold that episode and made it much more interesting. And goddamn, does Kurtwood Smith ever do a good job as Anorex. He really sells someone who's absolutely obsessed. And the last 3 entries on my list were from Voyager. But I will say overall, if I had to pick a show in the Star Trek franchise that doesn't do a really good job of getting guest actors, it's Voyager. They have had a lot of bad guest actors, but when they do it right, they really hit it right. And I think they absolutely nailed it here with Anorex and his obsession over controlling time and being this Ahab-esque character. Is that he really, a less actor would have made this role very uninteresting or harder to buy, but he sold it, and it was part of what makes this episode so damn good. So next we'll get into my number 2, which is David Warner as Gol Madrid in Chain of Command. And I don't even know if I need to explain this. I think it's pretty self-explanatory how amazing this performance is. David Warner, sadly passed away recently. But his performance here with Patrick Stewart, the back and forth between them as Gol Madrid tortures Jean-Luc Picard, and the battle of wits that ensues between the two of them is stuff of legends, is stuff of gold. The there are 4 lights, that's become really part of at least Star Trek pop culture, maybe even pop culture. And there's a reason for that, and he has said how he's trying to have the upper hand on Picard, but then Picard somehow weasels in and pushes his buttons. I mean, it's fucking amazing. And again, it's really beneficial that he was able to play off of such a master actor like Patrick Stewart. But I think he himself is the master actor, and the two of them is like the chemistry is just the sparks fly. And so, I think this is definitely because David Warner also he was in 2 Star Trek movies, 5 and 6. He played a human ambassador in 5 and Chancellor Gorkon in 6. He was okay as Gorkon in Star Trek 5. His performance was forgettable because that movie sucked. But I think it tells you, like, when you have the right script, when you have the right actor to play off, then you can really fucking nail it. And that's what he did in this episode. So next, we will get to my number 1 best one-off guest actor in Star Trek, and that is Harris Ulin as Eamon Maritza in the Deep Space Nine episode Duet. Duet is one of my favorite episodes of the entire Star Trek franchise, and in fact, it's one of my favorite episodes of any show ever. And it is an actor's episode. Harris Ulin's performance has a lot to do with why this episode is so great. I think it's something I think pretty much everyone can agree upon, is that if there was a lesser actor in this role, this episode would not be good, let alone as great as it is. He really has to sell this role, and he does. Now, he's playing off of Nana Visitor, who I think's her performance throughout season 1 has been kind of hit or miss. I talked about her performance in the episode Battle Lines, where I thought she did a pretty poor job. And some episodes she was just okay and passable. Other episodes she was pretty good. But in this episode, she really nails it. And I think she also gives a great performance. I've heard the opinion that she brings the episode down with her performance, but I disagree with that. I think she actually totally sells it and does an amazing job. But I think it may be her playing off of someone as great as Harris Ulin. And Nana Visitor herself even talked about that. I think she was asked who her favorite guest actor to work with was, and she said easily Harris Ulin, and that one of her favorite episodes is Duet, and that working with him was a great experience in her life, and that she absolutely thought he did an amazing job. And I think not only do I agree, I think pretty much anyone would agree watching this episode that the performance he gives as this like really despicable, slimy Cardassian who you find out is a war criminal, and then later you find out is actually not a war criminal, just a file clerk who is feeling guilty. Like, he sells that dynamic role, going from one type of character to another, and especially the parts when he's acting as Goldar Heel, when he's pretending to be Goldar Heel, when he's being this despicable, I killed every last person in the champ and I justify genocide and all this shit, is crazy, like insane, despicable shit. But he totally sells it and just makes your blood curl. And again, the interactions between him and Nana Visitor were just pure gold. So I think easily, like when I came up with this idea for this top 10, like easily he was my number one. Like that was one of the first things I decided. I think that it was the very clearest thing. His performance is just so good. So that is my number one, Harris Ulin as Eamon Maritza. So that is it for my top 10 best one-off guest actors. As I said, I'll have several other top 10s in the coming months that will be kind of similar to this one. So keep an eye out on that. Also check out my channel at the moment covering Star Wars Ahsoka week to week and Star Trek Lower Decks week to week, and also going back and reviewing older episodes of Star Trek The Next Generation, and also covering many other videos on many other topics, Star Trek and non-Star Trek alike. So be sure to subscribe so you can keep up with all of that. And thanks a lot for watching.